Thank you. Hello, so my name is Juliette Samman, and I'm the coordinator for One Democratic State initiative in France. I'm glad to see the interest today for the event and for the topic as it was in the conversation before. I would add a few words to this discussion by focusing on the concept of secularism. So I hope it will already address some of the questions that were raised, and if not, I'd be happy to continue the discussion during the Q&A. So if you read our declaration for Tomorrow's Palestine, I think that you have it on paper for those in person in Madrid, and we'll put the link on the chat. So you can see on it that the vision of one democratic state has 5 core principles. So it's a Palestinian state, democratic, secular, socially just state, and a state of law. But the question is, why should this state be secular, and what does it mean? So secularism is deeply related to the depoliticization of identities, which we talk about a lot at ODSI. So the politicization of identities is the conditioning of political rights or political decisions or characteristics on belonging to a certain identity. So the Zionist colonial project, for instance, it's not simply about encouraging Jews to move to Palestine on the basis of religion or cultural significance, but it's about creating a Jewish supremacist state where they have political rights on the basis of this identity, while native Palestinians are dominated. By opposition, depoliticizing identities means that we are removing this identity condition. So every citizen, regardless of their identity, has the same rights, the same representation, but also the same level of accountability and of protection. So political and legal decisions are not using, or they are not based on identity. So it's not about delegitimizing certain groups, for example, Jews or people who want to move to Palestine for work or relationships. It's about dismantling the supremacy, and it's about delegitimizing identity-based political claims. So in a democratic Palestine, Jewish citizens will have the right to express their Jewish identity or to practice their Jewish religion, but that will be because they are citizens and not because they are Jews, contrary to Zionism. And the same way, other individuals will have the same rights. So, for example, among the things that ODS dismantles are the legal segregation between Jews and non-Jews, whether they are citizens or not. This includes access to citizenships or to permits, to land, education, social welfare, etc. So all these discriminations that are currently part of the backbone of Israeli law today. But depoliticizing identities go beyond these rights, and it addresses also the root causes, so the social, political, cultural dynamics, for example, associating a certain esteem or hostility to an identity, which can then inform political behaviors or decisions. So the process of depoliticizing identities really aims to dismantle all of these aspects. Now, coming back to our subject and why secularism matters, simply because religion is part of identity, and religious identity needs to be depoliticized, as other aspects of a person's or a group's identity need to be as well. Secularism has always been part of the liberation movement in Palestine, and it's important to understand that this was not some innovative political stance of a few revolutionary thinkers. It was so revolutionary groups in general, and including Arab groups, would be secular because it was the shared vision of Palestine. This is not to say that religion was not part of identity, because obviously it was, but the Palestinian nationalism that emerged after the Nakba was based on unity transcending confessional identities. So it was based on a shared identity, which was related to the land in particular, was also related to dispossession, oppression, exile, sacrifice, resistance. So what was stressed was what was common. And after the Nakba, it translated into unity against colonizers. So as a consequence, the armed resistance and the movements that were fighting for the liberation and for the sovereignty of Palestinians in the 60s and 70s were secular. From the Fedayeen to the parties and factions that later on formed the PLO. And it got weakened then around Oslo in particular, and in particular due to an instrumentalization of religious identity in Palestine by Israel and its allies. Alain will speak more about the current relationship between armed resistance and secularism right after. So the secular vision was always here, and it reflected a reality of multiple religions being present in the country. Even though there was a majority and minorities, the vision of liberation was a vision in which no group would be imposing its religion as the authority over the others. Now I propose to look at what a secular state can, should, or should not look like in practice. I will use the example of laicity in France as a starting point to compare it with the Palestinian vision of secularism and understand that what can turn secularism into a tool of discrimination. So in France, secularism is expressed in different ways, such as the separation between the church and the state. So the French state doesn't interfere in religious matter and other way around. But the main expression of secularism is the principle of laicity, on which I will focus. Before, I would like to clarify some of the terms and how they are used, because it will matter to understand how secularism is applied. So in French, secular was initially used to designate the clergy, so religious Christian officers, staff, if we can say. So the clergy that was present in civil society was secular, versus and opposed to the clergy that was withdrawn from society, for example, monks. So it was a separation within the religious world, but with time it evolved to designate the separation between the religious and non-religious world. But what's important to note is that in French, we very rarely use the term secular. We use the term laïque, and we speak about a laïc state, not a secular state. And for example, personally, if I hear the term secular in French, I would think that, well, first I would think that it sounds weird. And I would think that it refers to the medieval use, so to the secular clergy. And this is important to understand that laicity is the expression of secularism in France. And I would say that this is actually an issue, because laicity is a right-based approach. So it puts on paper equal rights and recognition to all. It puts mechanism for this, but it doesn't address the root causes and the sociocultural context. So in practice, it's not enough to protect rights attached to laicity, and it can also be distorted and used as a tool to implement especially Islamophobic practices. So looking at the principle in itself, laicity guarantees the freedom of belief and of expressing, practicing beliefs, the separation between state and religious institutions, and the neutrality of the state in front of religion, which means that people have the same rights and representation, but also that state actors and officers should not show any signs of religion or express their religious beliefs in the context of public service, to remain neutral and to allow people to feel comfortable, regardless of their religion, when they receive this public service. This is an important point. I'll come back to it later. So laicity is a core principle of the state. It's present in the French Declaration of Human Rights and Human and Citizens' Rights, in the Constitution, in the law. And in principle, it guarantees that everyone has access to the same rights and no one is imposed a certain religion. And it does create a very notable and positive difference in terms of rights, social links. So I will speak about what doesn't work well, but I want to clarify also that it has brought a lot of positive elements in terms of rights and equality. The problem is that because it doesn't address the social constructs, it is not applied equally. So what happens is that as long as you are white or white passing, as long as your religion is not visible, that it is not or is not assumed to be Islam, laicity will protect you. but otherwise it doesn't properly apply. So you would still benefit from it to a certain extent, but it will not protect you against discrimination. So the application of laicity is mixed with these social cultural realities, which means that when you have a society in which there is a lot of Islamophobia and racism, it will hinder the protection that laicity is supposed to provide. It also goes beyond this limited protection. In the recent years, so laicity has been used, and including by politicians and lawmakers, to reduce the rights of Muslims based on the accusation that they do not respect laicity. So you remember I said that laicity means state officials should not show signs of religion. This aspect in particular has been distorted to limit Muslims' right to express their religion in public space on the basis that they should remain neutral too, which is a complete distorted and inaccurate use of laicity. And it is not applied to other religious groups, by the way. So the law is clear that laicity means that the state remains neutral regarding religion and identities, but citizens are not requested this neutrality. On the contrary, it's supposed to protect their rights to religious beliefs and practice. And this is a difference that is being purposefully erased in France to serve racist and Islamophobic agendas. So what can we learn from this? What we clearly see is that secularism can be used or manipulated to become a tool of oppression. But we also should not limit secularism to this and understand that secularism is not inherently discriminatory. I see two aspects in the French context or in the French example that might weaken secularism. The first one that I mentioned before is the right-based principle. So the fact that it's limited to this right-based or right aspect without looking at the root causes, while secularism requires to address cultural hegemony, political, social, cultural roots that are behind the politicization of identity. And this is why ODS's vision of a secular state is part of the larger objective of depoliticizing identities. Second, the French application of secularism focuses on the state. So it says that the state should not be religious, but there is no clear vision of what a secular society means, which facilitates the idea that religious expression, when it's not considered as like part of the culture, which some religion are because of history, that these religious expressions that are not part of the culture should be erased. While the Palestinian vision of liberation is a vision of the society as multi-religious and as multi-identity. So I will conclude by saying that the Palestinian vision of secularism in itself, it goes beyond the French laicity's right-based and top-level vision. It's important to uphold this vision while learning from the experience of France, because the risk is that in the application of secularism, we fall into a trap of practical thinking only. So it's important to keep this vision and to learn the lessons, to remain true to the social kaleidoscope and multi-religious vision of a secular Palestinian state. I will stop here. Thank you for your attention, and happy to address questions later on.